time is now, so don't turn your head. Don't blink, for you might miss it. Become aware of it. Watchful.
It's so easy to lose faith in yourself and also others over here. I feel there is no need to plan because it's all so far in advance and all so uncertain at the present. I live for the future, and then at times I wonder if there will even be one at all. I think this was June 24, '68. That's right at the heart of Tet. So we were getting slammed pretty hard. I feel there is no need to plan. When I went to Vietnam, I had just come out of college, but all of a sudden the world became very real to me. My mother always said I never was the same, which I found interesting. I felt I was, meaning as a younger man, coming back in my 20s. She used to say, you don't laugh and joke the way you used to, and I suppose there is something to that.
Well, I think an important point to start with is the fact that distress after any type of tragedy is very normal. And for the vast majority of people, they will experience some level of distress.
Just serving was very traumatic in Vietnam. I remember going, and when I got in Vietnam, I remember them telling me in my company area, you will be here for 1 week. About 5 o'clock in the morning, they woke me up, and they said, get up, get your stuff packed, you're going out to the field. And I said, out to the field? What happened to the week? And they said, there's been people killed and they need replacements.
It was the 18th Grenadier Division of the Germans, the ones that hit us and almost knocked us out. Fighting right there in that area, see, they almost beat us to death. It was awful.
So I found it rather difficult. And especially off R&R, I'd have to say. I went to Japan for our R&R and enjoyed a Christmas period there, and then all of a sudden I was back. And it was like a nightmare, you know, to go back out there and start all over again.
Being in the jungles in the mountain, it was just terrible. The rains, the monsoons, it would rain for 4 and 5 months at a time, just no breaks. I remember we would tie ourselves onto trees in the mountains to keep from rolling down the hill at night so we could sleep. We've killed soldiers, and it would be late at night and when we would kill them, and we would actually have to have our meal, and they would be laying there next to us and even sleep with them until the next day where we could leave the area. Just very hard to come home and remember these things.
But I had a friend that, well, I think he got his legs shot off. I'm not sure. The only thing I could do is drag him back, and it was so cold you didn't know what was wrong. You know, whether I know he couldn't stand up. I had to drag him on top of snow to get him back to where they could get him, but I never heard from him anymore.
Any kind of traumatic event can have a lifelong effect, whether it's in the military or outside of the military. And you make a choice as a person to either deal with that and seek help and assistance and count on your family and friends and the professionals to assist you with that, or, you know, you don't.
So if the distress is lasting longer than a few days or a few weeks, that's cause for concern. And also if the distress is causing serious impairments to your normal functioning.
Whenever you have these big life-changing events, it's going to affect you one way or the other, and you're going to bring positive and negative to that. Now look at the life of especially a National Guard soldier. You're deployed, so you're away from your family, your friends, your jobs for a year. You're in a high-stress environment. You're in a new country where they're speaking languages you don't know. All this combined, I think, provides a lot of stress.
Going through combat was very hard, and the things that you see, I held a friend of mine that had been shot, and he was bleeding to death, waiting for the medevac helicopter, and he died in my arms. And I was telling him that everything would be fine, and I knew it wouldn't. Very traumatic. Being on patrol, and the person in front of you, their head explode and from a sniper round, and just traumatic to see that and think about that. And then you kill enemy soldiers, you go through their paperwork and you find pictures of their family and their children and just personal documents, and you have to put that out of your mind to continue your job. I used to put out the mechanical ambush at night, every night, 7 days a week. And many times my mechanical ambush that I put out would kill people. And I had to live with that. And you ask yourself, isn't it a sin to kill people? And you think about that quite often.
If it's affecting you as a student, as a husband, as a father, as an employee, then that also is a red flag that we may be dealing with more important issues here.
I would say part of the failure of my first marriage was due to military stuff. I was doing my reserve time when I met my first wife. Things got tough. We had a strike at the phone company. I went back on active duty. She wasn't cut out to be a military wife. It didn't work out. I expected her to take care of the house like I took care of the ship. I want to make sure I got clean dishes and clean sheets and nothing's out of place. Everything's where it's supposed to be. My home was supposed to be ship-shape, just like my work was ship-shape. So I probably had more pressures on her than would have been in a normal newlywed situation had I not had the Vietnam experience prior to that.
I went from, this big weight on your shoulders, this constant stress and worry and responsibility, to housewife and remodeling a kitchen. That was my big responsibility for about 6 months, and it was a drastic change. Obviously, it took its toll. I ended up to the point where I had to ask for help from the military, as far as mine was mostly depression, a lot of anger issues.
When we look at the research with post-traumatic stress disorder, there are some variables that influence who may or may not experience PTSD. Our best research at this point tells us that about 40% of people who experience traumatic events end up meeting the diagnostic criteria for PTSD.
I ended up marrying a lady that I've been married to now for 30 years. Until we got really established in a relationship, I didn't expose some of the atrocities that bothered me in Vietnam. Though she understood something was wrong, when I'd get up in the middle of the night, I'd go out and I'd get my German Shepherd and we'd go walk the perimeter of the house just to make sure, whatever dream I was having or whatever unsettled feeling I had about security, I had to go secure my perimeter. I had to make sure everything was okay.
One of the, I would venture to say, more common symptoms of PTSD is what we call re-experiencing. And those are the individuals who are dealing with nightmares, flashbacks, or what we call intrusive thoughts, which are memories of the traumatic event that they are having trouble controlling. They're re-experiencing that trauma on a regular basis, and it's directly negatively impacting on their lives.
I remember one experience, which was a few years later, when it was storming outside, and it was a big clap of thunder, and I evidently was asleep, but I ended up on the ground crawling up the hallway, and I woke up in the hallway in a low crawl position, like I was crawling along.
I've had guys come in and talk to me, and they'll say, I have things that I call cry days. I just get overwhelmed by either recollections or nightmares or Just sometimes a triggering, well, for me it was the smelling of Oriental food being processed by a restaurant. I can go back to Da Nang in a heartbeat by smelling curry or some of the Oriental spices that are used in their cooking. Just boom, and I'm there.
A single traumatic episode is difficult in its own right. But if you look at the in this case the combat veteran, the majority of the time you're going to see an individual who has experienced repeated traumas over a relatively short period of time. And that does affect not only how that condition is expressed, but also it affects the potential for full recovery.
Come home, well, there's a lot gone out of your life, and you'll never know where it went, and you'll never get it back. It takes a while to get your feet back on the ground, really.
So often, you get back into, you missed all those things, you come back and you're back in America with your friends, family, going to eat at McDonald's now, all right, hey, Walmart, great, and you do these things, and then, after a month, okay, I'm back in normal society, and that's when you start to, I guess, not relapse necessarily, but things slow down and the initial rush of being back is over, and that's when some of the problems come in.
Coming back to United States in 1970, there was a serious division in attitude with the United States public. The aggravation of having been in the war since, well, basically since '59, but really actively since probably '65, '66. The troop buildup, and there were a lot of people that were frustrated with the fact that this wasn't a quick ending resolution. It was extending into much more time than the public wanted to.
Arrived at home and basically started my life again. Really didn't have any social problems because I didn't have any friends. You're kind of weird when you come home, and you just don't fit in too well. You don't have much patience.
There is the whole issue of kind of this hyper-arousal that we see. And again, keep in mind, PTSD is an anxiety-based disorder. So what we tend to see in a lot of individuals with this condition is that they are highly charged, highly anxious.
The personal problems didn't really start until later in life, and the only thing I can really remember is I could not hold a job very well because I was looking for something that I couldn't find in a job. And this one particular doctor, after I talked to him, he explained to me that my problem with not holding a job was I was looking for what I was doing in Vietnam, and that was hunting man. He said, you'll never find that in a job here. You need to put that behind you and go forward. If you can't do that, you'll have a problem the rest of your life.
There was times I'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd find me sitting down by the fireplace just off somewhere, and she would gently encourage me to come back to earth, and we would talk for a little while. And
when you've been confronted with that level of pain, it's a very normal coping response to just shut off the feelings. It can be very effective. It has long-range ramifications, but at the time it makes a great deal of sense, and we do see that on a regular basis.
I became an employee for the local telephone company, and interacting with the public like that, I found I was much better off not mentioning being a Vietnam veteran per se, as to walk in the door, hi, I'm Jim Disney, Vietnam veteran extraordinaire, I'm here to fix your telephone. You kept your mouth shut.
And then another thing was, many people didn't even know I was gone. When you're only gone a year, it's like now. And you see a person and they're in the Guard, and all of a sudden they're gone for a while, you don't see them, then they show back up. Where have you been? Well, I've been to Iraq. Well, it was the same with me. Where have you been? I'd say, I've been to Vietnam. You gotta be kidding me. That type of thing. So when people aren't directly involved, they're not thinking about it every day. And you come home and you think everybody is thinking about it, and then really you find most people didn't care.
Friends, family, those are big, but retaining those ties that you had when you deployed and were in combat I think that's the most important, because you come back, and especially as National Guard soldiers, then you come back and you disperse and you go back to your civilian life. And even if there were things, you know, I've mentioned several times that I was closest to my girlfriend, but there were things that I couldn't really explain to her because she wasn't there, and especially not being in the military. And then there were other things that I could talk to about soldiers who weren't there, because they understand the military and could understand some of the things I'd gone through and just some of those experiences, and really appreciate those.
But it was very hard to deal with because there was no outreach, or there's no way to vent yourself other than going and drinking or fighting, or which I did a little of that myself, but that's not the answer. The answer is to seek help.
Being accepted back into your family, you know, that is critical to a fella getting well-based, well-loved, well-understood, for him to be able to shake off some of the horrors of war and come back to being a normal civilian kind of person.
We also hope, and it's certainly our mission at the VA, that all veterans and families are aware that they don't have to do it alone, and that there are millions of competent, capable, and concerned professionals through the VA that are here to serve and to really help facilitate that process of reentry.
When I was a first sergeant, I know that I focused a lot in our training before the deployment and after the deployment both, that on stressing to them that this kind of thing was normal, that a lot of people did experience extra stress and anger issues and depression and just a lot of problems and adjustment disorders before and after a deployment, and sometimes during a deployment, and that it's normal, and it shouldn't have that mental health stigma to it.
There is a stigma attached to seeking counseling in American society for anything, whether it's smoking, gambling, whatever. You know, we see it as a weakness, and so if I were to say anything, I would say it's not a weakness. That those groups are there for you. Help's gotten much better. We've learned much more about the human brain, the psyche, and combat situations, and that helps out there. And seek it. Doesn't make you weak. You know, it doesn't make you less of a man, less of a woman, less of a soldier.
And you attempt to handle it on your own. And we see a lot of soldiers still that, you know, a year later or 2 years later, they haven't sought the proper assistance for whatever reason. Maybe it's the stigma of mental health disorders that we have in America, or maybe it's fear, or don't want to be seen with a weakness in their family's eyes, that kind of thing. But I think anytime a person experiences a traumatic event, in or out of war, in or out of combat, they need to seek help and talk to somebody in order to deal with it and move through it and move on with their lives.
I see a lot of situations where fellows that come in, they'll talk to me and they'll say, well, I had a 15-minute conversation with my psychiatrist. Well, I don't think 15 minutes is nearly enough time. You need hours of interacting conversations between the patient and the psychiatrist to get a deep-seated understanding of what's really bothering this veteran.
And there really has been movement towards understanding it for what it is. It's an anxiety-based disorder, kind of demystifying it. It's no longer, you know, as many World War II vets will tell you, that diagnosis of being shell-shocked was comparable to being called, you know, mentally ill. It really had tremendous negative connotations, and we're moving away from that.
Go get the help, let that help you, and then continue being a great American.
The thing that really bothers me is a veteran that, like you or I, we're home, we're living here free, probably one of the best countries in America. I mean, we're the best country in the world. America is it. If you go anywhere else, and or some of these poor countries that don't have anything, and you come home, you should thank the veteran that fought for your freedom and the rights that you have here.
I don't understand America's attitude towards their veterans. You know, they say, we got to go to war, we got to do this, and we got to take this dictator out and stuff. But then when those people that do that come home, it's like, ooh, you nasty person, you did that, you were such a vile, evil, ugly person. we're doing our job. You ask us to be there, and you ask us to do this, and then you want to treat us like crap when we do it. There's a bad message right there.
It's just terrible to think that I would go to war, lose my leg, and come home, and no one is willing to help me to recover my life and try to go on. And then I can't find a job. So I think they're doing better, like I said. They're bringing it to light. They probably just don't know what to do. And again, the funding may not be there, because we've got a lot of veterans out there that are injured, and not just physically, but mentally.
With Vietnam, we weren't prepared to handle that, and we're still dealing with that because they didn't handle that well at all. With Desert Storm, 100-hour war, great decisive victory, but it wasn't a prolonged battle where you're having a lot of this. So we've gone 30 years without having to deal with any of this, and even with the physical injuries, I don't think that we were prepared as a nation and as an army.
And the military is changing drastically. I just spent 3 days with the National Guard down at Camp Atterbury, and it's much more like a business-like situation. The mess halls, everything has changed. And I couldn't help but see that. It's run like a business. And the yelling and screaming and the calisthenics that we all did so much, and punishment seems to be over. It's much more refined, almost too refined for me, because I know what that battle's like. I know what the sound's like, and they're not getting it, meaning in training. They're using very fast equipment. They're looking at radars. They're looking at all types of new things. But I'm telling you, in realistic terms, if you're going to take a building, you're going to see the same thing I saw in Ashaw Valley, meaning the noise, the hurt. So that does not leave, but the training now does not kind of get you ready for that.
Probably if it would have been our old soldiers over there, things might be a lot different. We had our way of taking care of things. They're sending people over there right now, don't even, I don't know, they're not ready for it. I wouldn't be, if I'm fighting where I was fighting and have to go there and fight, it's altogether different. You wouldn't be, you'd kill the first day.
The Veterans Administration and the military, they're doing a lot right now to help soldiers deal with the issues as they come home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And there's a lot more I think we could do. There's still a lot of research we need to do with PTSD and stress disorders, and we've got a long way to go still, but I think they've come a long way already.
It's a learning curve, and we're learning every day. I mean, if you look at the current conflicts, not only are we addressing issues like PTSD prior to the deployment, we actually have support people in the combat theater providing support, and then it has a tremendous amount of focus once they are deployed back home stateside. We really are trying to open up every possible avenue to help the combat veteran.
After they come home, they need to seek help, all veterans that come home, even veterans that are out of the service. It's important to talk, and that's probably the most important thing that, for me, to heal myself, was to talk about my experiences. Because a lot of veterans come home, and like I said, they'll either hide in a drink bottle, they'll go out into the wilderness and live on their own, and they don't want to talk about their experiences. But if you don't vent, that pressure will build up.
It's intimidating to think about a support group, but once you've gotten through that, that foot in the door and you've given it a trial, it 99.9% of the time ends up being an extremely rewarding experience.
And what I see happening is a lot of these guys come back, try to assimilate themselves back into life and be a normal person, and they're just overwhelmed some days. They just can't.
And the longer you keep that bottled up, you're just carrying a burden.
How do we heal that? How do we make that all better? I don't know. Love is the biggest healer. Time helps, but just accept me for who I am and what I am. I've been through hell, and I need somebody to love me out of hell.
I think we've learned quite a bit, and that there are a lot of agencies out there and a lot of people willing to help. What's too much, I don't know, but I think we're doing a much better job, and I think awareness is the biggest point.
The main thing is you have to get the word out to the veteran that they're available. That's still a big problem, no matter how much you do. Some people just don't get it. They just, first of all, they don't want to ask for any help. Second of all, some of them can't read or write. Some don't have telephones. The computer is a real situation that in the Senate we're always talking about use the computer and do this and what. There are many people that don't use computers at all, and they don't even know what you're talking about when you're talking about yada.com, and a lot of our veterans groups do that, and good, we've got the word out. Well, no. There's guys on the farm down there that have no more idea what you're talking about than the man in the moon. So I guess the word is getting the word out to the veterans and the families. Many times a mother or father or sister can get that word to them that you need help and you need to go.
Bring them back into society groups. Get them involved in things to make them normal feeling again. If you've got plays and operas and things in your house, if you've got recreational things, go bowling with them, take them to the pool hall, take them down to the Veterans Organization Club. Get them involved. Don't let them sit around and think about what they've just been through. They need to get involved and get them jobs. For goodness sakes, employers, if you have a position or two that you can get a disabled veteran into, for goodness sakes, give him a chance to prove himself.
I'm proud to say I'm a combat veteran. I find others are too. And there's a bond that will always be among us. I don't care what service you're in.
But we got to have a little faith in each other. We got to have brotherly love come back to the forefront, and we got to realize that we're Americans above all else, and whatever's going on in the world today, everybody still thinks America is the greatest place in the world to live.
Just remember that, you know, the soldiers are over there fighting, and they're fighting because they're told to do things. Stand behind them and be proud of them, because they're doing what they're told to do, and what you read in the paper is not always true.
To me, a veteran is the very most important thing in an American way of living, because without that veteran, none of us have freedoms. None of us have the ability to vote, to go to the church of our choice, to wear the clothes we want to wear, to live where we want to live, do what we want to do for a life. Without that veteran, none of that happens.
You do what you have to do to stay alive, and it's not a good thing, but you know, you're going to come back home one way or the other, and that's what I had. I came back home.